Hey guys, welcome to my channel. My name is ReadingBear and I hope you are ready for some more stories. And today, we'll take a look at some new malicious compliance content. If you enjoyed my content, please don't forget to subscribe to my channel and post some bear emojis in the comment. And now, let's dive right into the stories.
First one is titled, New Travel Policy to Save Money Ends Up Costing So Much More. My company was on a cost-saving kick and decided to look for a way to shave pennies. Now they could have looked at the amount of money that was squandered by people jetting all over the country on company time at a huge hourly rate. Basically the labor spend is always much higher than the cost of the flight, car hire, hotel and food combined, or the number of strategizing away days that HR etc. went on, but no, they came for the lowly engineers. When the company starts counting paper clips, you know that you are about to have some fun. We were called to a consultation session, read. We are telling you what we decided based on what we think goes on and not what actually goes on. The session was about saving money on hire cars. In our company, if you have to go away from your home site, you can use your own car and choose a mileage rate up to about a 40-mile journey. If it is longer, then you should have a hire car. Hire cars are usually dropped off at the office by transporter, or you can pick one up at a hire office, or you can get a car dropped off at home for a small fee, £14 plus fuel. Travel Department announced that there were to be no more home drop-offs to save money. The engineers knew how this was going to pan out and said nothing. The thing to know here about the travel department is that they do not travel. None of the knowledge is from the real world. Travel announced that the new policy was that home drop-offs were to cease. We had to pick up the hire car at the office or at the nearest Hertz rental location. Sounds simple. All the engineers who travel a lot could instantly see the issues, but as we were told that this is the new policy, we had to comply. So we did. Maliciously. I was on a job 300 miles away at the customer site. I traveled down on the Monday morning, starting at 6 a.m., and back up Thursday, home about 6 p.m. Because of the travel time, I got the Friday off. I also lived a 100-mile round trip from the office, and my nearest Hertz office was at the airport. This was not an unusual situation. A lot of people I worked with traveled to client locations. The weekend arrived. Usually at some point over the weekend a car is dropped off and the key and paperwork is popped through my letterbox for the princely sum of £14 and no time from me. Instead, because the Hertz office was closed at 6 a.m. on the Monday morning, I picked up the car the day before. Because my wife needed my car while I was away, and therefore could not leave my car parked at the airport, I took a taxi as per company travel policy, £35 and 40 minutes. I picked up the car, about 30 minutes, and drove home, about 30 minutes. On the Thursday evening, instead of heading home and getting the car picked up on the Friday, I headed straight to the airport, dropped off the car and took a taxi back, £40 and about 40 minutes due to busy traffic. Our expenses are done monthly, so by the end of the month I have 3 weeks travel to account for, which would have been 3 times £14 plus a small refueling charge for the trip back to the Hertz office. Instead they got about £200 for taxi fares and an overtime bill of about 4.5 hours at about £80 per hour. I was not the only one. Some engineers took a taxi into the office to pick up the car, as their spouse needed the car while they were away. Some took a taxi to the nearest Hertz office. All of us put in our overtime at the end of the month. Travel has no overtime budget, and so it all got claimed from the project. The project labor budget teams went ballistic and went all flaming torches and pitchforks on the travel department. The policy didn't last the day. Next one is titled, Read My Lease, you say? Anyway, this grudge has been simmering for almost a year now and has only just come to fruition. It began with my next-door neighbor leaving me a passive-aggressive note for having trash outside my door while I was cleaning my apartment. 2 important points here. 1. I was deep cleaning because the landlord sent a note saying the adjoining apartment, my neighbors, had roaches. I needed to clean so the exterminator could see if my apartment was infested as well. 2. The trash was by my door for 30 minutes at most. I was trying to save a trip to the dumpster and doing a final sweep of the apartment before heading down. Now, prior to this incident, this neighbor had already upset me by constantly blaring their loud music to the point where my apartment walls vibrated. Fortunately for them, I prefer to avoid confrontation, so I never called them out on it. After the passive-aggressive note calling me a pig though, all bets were off. She wrote that I should read my lease, since I left my nasty trash everywhere. Okay, which, it's on. I read my lease like I was snorting coke off it. Every time they played their music loud, I filed a noise complaint. When I got a whiff of pot coming from their apartment, I filed another complaint. The lease says tenants must comply with the state's drug laws or risk eviction, so, hey, another win for me. Finally, they brought a dog into the apartment despite the no pet policy's exception only being for service animals. This was obviously not a service dog since it howled day and night, betraying no semblance of training. I'm pretty sure I'm not the only one who complained after that final stunt, since my landlord said the noisy dog problem was being taken care of through litigation and my next-door neighbor's lease would not be renewed. Guess she should have read it. Next one is titled, Many years ago we had a newly promoted manager. We worked for a utility company at the time, so we worked out and about carrying out various repairs. Newly promoted manager Mr. Twatterly decided that leaving the yard 2 minutes early was a huge offense to his authority. Meeting called for all outdoor staff. Having checked the cameras for the last week, I've noticed a significant number of you leaving the yard before your 5:30 p.m. finishing time. This will not be happening in future. Your hours are 7:30 a.m. to 5:30 p.m., is that understood? A few grunts of yes from amongst the 40 or so guys present. Cue malicious compliance. We lined our vans up on the road outside the depot every morning for a week until exactly 7:30 a.m., when we then entered the yard to start our day. Mr. Twatterly has a hissy fit and says you are supposed to be in the office at 7:30 and not just arriving on the yard. So he was informed that he'd told us that we weren't allowed to leave the yard until 5:30 p.m. and our hours are 7:30 a.m. to 5:30 p.m. So we naturally assumed that if we weren't allowed off-site until 5:30 that we weren't allowed on site until 7:30. He was absolutely ducking livid that we'd thrown back his stupidity at him. They'd paid 4 storemen to come at 7 a.m. to process our orders and nobody put any in because we were all sat outside the yard. Needless to say, he stopped being so anal and petty after that. Next one is titled, Management fined me for being a considerate neighbor, so I made life difficult for them with my payments of the fine. I live in an apartment building where everybody gets one assigned parking space per apartment as standard. You can pay for an extra one, but we don't need that. Due to a history of bad parking in the car park, they introduced a rule whereby you could be fined if you do not park in your allotted parking spot. Now my parking space is at the end of a row. On one side I have a wall about 1.5 meters away from the end of my parking space. On the other is the car belonging to the person who lives directly below me in the building. My neighbors are a family with 3 young children. Knowing how difficult it can be to get all of their kids into their car seats, I have 2 of my own. I have generally given them a bit of space and parked a little outside of the line on the opposite side. Remember, next to me on the opposite side of my parking space is a wall. There is no reason for anyone to walk next to my car at that point. This is something I have been doing for months. I understand the need to enforce the rule where cars interfere with other parking spots or walkways, but for me, parking a little outside the spot affected nobody other than my neighbor, who was given more space to get their kids into the car. I walked down to my car recently to see a note from the management office telling me I had been fined. I went to speak to them and sure enough it was for parking outside of the space. I tried to explain to them that it was to help my neighbor and that nobody could be inconvenienced, but they told me rules were ruled and that there was nothing to do about it. I had a fine of 60 Singapore dollars and had 40 days to pay it. Being quite riled up, I went through the relevant contract and was dismayed to find that they were indeed correct. There was absolutely nothing I could do about it. I did however note that there was a statement in the contract stating that every single payment received by the management company had to receive a written receipt signed for by the management company within 2 working days. There was also no rules about me having to make payment of my fine in a single deposit. So, this is where the malicious compliance comes in. By this point there was 37 days remaining to pay the fine, so I divided the $60 by 37 and set 37 recurring payments of $1.63 daily for the time remaining with my bank, which was very little effort. After a few days had passed, I went to the management office asking for my receipts. They told me they would provide my receipt upon full payment, to which I respond that the contract was quite clear. They must provide a written receipt for each and every payment, not for each and every fine, and that they were already overdue my first receipt by a day. They tried arguing with me, but it was completely clear from the contract, so every couple of days they had to fill out receipts and then walk them over to my letterbox. I have continued to give my neighbor some extra space by parking slightly over the opposite line, but as of yet have not received another fine. Last one is titled, "For the Sake of 3 Minutes." I worked in the tourism sector in a museum as a hands-on historian, actor. Our job was to expand on the text in exhibitions, play games with the kids, answer questions and be general fonts of useless knowledge. 8 of us, and we had medieval characters, wore costumes and were generally well received. It was hokey and corny but fun. Hardly a stellar paying job, but we all loved what we did, knew a lot and worked damn hard to make sure guests were happy. Until our old boss had to leave due to family issues and we got a new one. A real corporate manager. Before she arrived, our old boss was pretty lax. He didn't have to be breathing over our shoulders as he knew that we did our jobs. We had a clocking in machine and the rule was, logging out 3 minutes early or late didn't affect our pay. Because we enjoyed the work, we always come in early, clock in, not being paid. To set everything up, we had to get dressed, set up the games, make sure the activities were out, general maintenance stuff. This took time. Occasionally we ended up staying late if something unexpected came up. Again, no problem. When the new boss started, she didn't straight away start making changes, but she was watching us. Our work is obviously dependent on how much human traffic we have. If there are no patrons, there's nothing for us to do. The flip side was that when it was busy we didn't have time to blink. She called us into a meeting and said that it wasn't suitable that during quiet time we were standing around talking and we should be engaging in some kind of work like cleaning, tidying or picking up rubbish. Despite that, we had a team that did that. So work for work's sake. To justify our wages as we weren't being paid to chat. It was explained to her by our unofficial team leader that you're not just paying for our labor but our time as well. She did not understand this idea. But we made ourselves look busy. She also believed that she knew the job better than we did, stopped listening to our suggestions and started making little rules of what we could and couldn't tell people regarding the history. Nothing too gruesome, for instance. Ever met children? They love the gory details, age appropriate of course. There's a reason why horrible histories is so popular. The second issue cued the malicious compliance. Again another meeting. This time over the 3 minutes early clock out. That we were paid until 1700, not 1657. That our hours were 10 o'clock to 1700, no mention of us clocking in early. So we did just that. No one clocked out before 1700. But no one clocked out after 1701 either. Nor did we clock in early anymore. More than once she saw us standing at the clock-in machine at 9:55. Asked us to clock in. We said no, that it wasn't time. She tried telling us that we should be in early to prepare regardless of whether we were being paid. We told her no, working without pay is not what we're doing. This meant that those 20 to 25 minutes per person set up were now being done once we were clocked in. No longer was the museum ready when the doors opened. Early morning patrons noticed. Because of her make them work every second regardless, it also meant the team was often scarce. We would be moving rubbish, filling leaflet shelves, getting rid of cleaning instruments and also, to be honest, hiding to get 5 minutes of peace. Morale also fell, so we followed the letter but not the spirit of the job description. We frankly stopped caring as we didn't feel valued. I don't know what it's like now as the entire team left within 9 months. Far as if no, she's still there, don't know how she's running the ship. But none of us have been back. Thanks for listening.